Anita moved her knee to allow me to sit down. The blue docks and old town lay around us. "Hello, Angie," she said. "What are you doing?" It was the same question she'd asked on a night 2 years ago. Then, as now, I couldn't tell if she meant the present moment or the whole of my life since leaving school. I told her I'd come south with some Paris friends who worked in film. Cannes in May sounded like a good place to cry behind dark glasses, I said. Anita gave me a long look. Her child, fidgeting at her lap, stopped fidgeting and stared too. "Angie isn't happy," she murmured, as if she was explaining something to someone far too young to understand. The man with them smoked in a preoccupied way, as if the doubling of the female presence had given him an excuse to forget it. Commandeering the cigarettes, he stood up to take the child for a walk. His face was vaguely familiar, but Anita neglected to introduce him, and he hadn't introduced himself. We watched them go along the dock, his long arm dangling down to meet the child's upstretched fingers. "What about you?" I said. "You're looking marvellous, and unless I'm mistaken, happy." Yes, things are cool now." She smiled sleepily and waved a hand towards the scenery behind her. "We've got a fantastic place just over there." Across the bay, there was a little promontory against the green mass of Cap Ferrat. On the cliff, among flat-topped pines, I could make out the roof and windows of a large white house. She'd embarked on a movie career, though, as I seem to remember, that night in London she'd been with musicians. In any case, it was reasonable to suppose she was here for the festival. "Have you seen many films?" I asked. "What about that new spaghetti western, the one with the amputees and dwarfs?" "No," she laughed. "Everyone is wading around in lakes of gore and shouting in Spanish. It sounds incredible." Well, after the screening, somebody asked me what I thought. I said I haven't the faintest fucking idea what's going on. She hadn't seen any films, which made me think she might have moved out of that world. Her man had nothing of the actor about him. Shaggy and stubbled, he looked more like a brooding poet. She asked me for a cigarette, and I shook my head, then remembered that for the first time in 8 years there was a packet of Dunhill in my bag. "I gave up when I was pregnant," I said, taking them out. "Doctor's orders. The other mothers thought my doctor was a health fanatic." We were in New Zealand at the time. "Oh, yes." She watched me fumbling with the pack. "You married a diplomat. He was with you in London." The question, "Where is he now?" hung in the air, while I worked out how to peel off the cellophane. "The doctor said smoking was bad for my milk. By the time my boy was weaned, I'd lost the taste for the things." "What's your boy's name?" "Alfie." She smiled at that. I like Alfie. I didn't give up smoking for Marlon, or anything else, but he's fine. I reached the moment of the shapely flame, the giving firmness of the filter in my lips. Anita watched closely, as if she was reliving her own first time. Buying the pack had been an impulsive decision the night before in Menton. Then I woke to find it on the bedside table, as it had always been in the carefree years before Alfie. To smoke again was freedom regained, and a mild rebuke to the child who, given the choice, had opted to live with his father. Marlon and his father came back along the dock eating ice creams. The man was sculpting the soft white peak with his tongue. The child jabbed the whole assemblage into his lips, recoiled at the cold, observed with curiosity this thing which had given him a shock, then tried again to get at all the sweetness at once. Memories of Alfie at that age flashed and cut me like fragments of a broken mirror falling out of the blue. At each assault on his ice cream, the white juice cascaded down Marlon's chin. His mother produced a handkerchief and wiped it off. "You should come up and see us, Angie," she said. "Ask the taxi to bring you to Villa Nellcote." I looked at the white house half hidden on the cliff top. It's a lovely spot, but I'm going back to Paris after the festival. I suppose she thought of me as someone she would see from time to time, bump into at parties, maybe involve in some romantic intrigues. She assumed I had money and could live on the coast. Once she realised I was a penniless drifter, it wouldn't interest her to know why I was alone. More coffees were ordered, though it was getting on for lunchtime. The man's indifference to me was growing mildly offensive. He raised an arm to scratch his head, and I glimpsed black tufts poking out from the armholes of his T-shirt. With his oily skin and the sweaty sheen of white men in hot places, he looked as though he hadn't worked out how often he needed to wash. Having finished his ice cream, he took up smoking again, and though he didn't feel the need to speak, from time to time he gave me a gap-toothed grin that seemed to say, "Any friend of Anita's." It wasn't satisfactory. I decided he was probably hung over, either that or stoned. "So you're here for the summer?" I directed the question at both of them. Anita answered. "We arrived a few weeks ago. Since then, Keith and the others have been looking around for a studio." A studio for Keith? His second name clicked into place. I must have seen him when his band came to Wellington. I had a clearer memory of the guitar player with the pudding basin blonde hair. The stage lights in the town hall turned into a dazzling shade of pink, so he looked like a boiled sweet jigging from side to side as he strummed. My clearest memory was the singer dancing around the microphone stand as if he was working himself up to asking it for a date. Keith began to say, or rather mumble, something. The hand holding his cigarette made helpless loops in the air. "There are no good studios in France," Anita translated. "So we're building one in our basement." She looked towards Villa Nellcote and laughed. "We come down here to escape the hammering." Keith spoke again, and I almost understood.